It's alright.
Oh my god!
Yo guys, what is up? Max on a Borderlands 3 video, and today we're updating Boresplosion Zane for level 72. This is genuinely the strongest build that I have in Borderlands 3. Like, if you were to ask me, Moxie, what's the strongest build that you've made? It's Boresplosion Zane, and it's not even close. Nothing comes close to the amount of AoE damage and like easy bossing, one-shotting potential that this build has. I could sit here and hype up this build for a really long time, but I'd rather just let the gameplay speak for itself. So, introducing Boresplosion Zane. Sorry to hear that just installed it. Going well. Working on Boresplosion. Wow, 957 million. Nice. One shot first phase. Oh, it might be a little too high for those. Next phase is how it hits. Nice. Oh my god, it almost killed it still. It almost kept going and got it. Nice. And you're dead too. Beautiful. Beautiful. That was perfect. So how does this build work? How do you deal so much damage with these weapons? Now, the core concept of this build is we're using splash damage weapons with splash damage annoyance, the Hustler class mod, and Eraser. Now, splash damage weapons don't normally crit. The AoE of splash damage weapons do not normally crit. However, the Hustler class mod, which is not a great class mod, is going to turn our non-critical hits into critical hits, or has a chance to turn them. So this big AoE from the Globetrotter, or the big AoE from the Jericho, or the Plague Bearer, the Backburner, any splash damage weapon, instead of having to hit crits and headshots, you have the AoE radius of these weapons critting. Now, what happens with these AoE weapons, like the Globetrotter, like the Shocker, like the Kong, like the Creamer, like the Yellow Cake, when they crit with Eraser, they're going to double dip in all of the previously applied damage to them. So, like, the way that this is working is you have to think about the same projectile hitting multiple enemies or carrying through multiple enemies to deal damage multiple times, and every time that it is going to apply that damage, it is going to be stacking upon of itself. So, for example, if I shoot the Creamer down the bridge of the Malawan takedown, it's going to hit the first enemies relatively hard. It's going to crit. But as those projectiles travel, because they're going to be eraser procking and keep traveling and keep going down the bridge, they're going to be building up damage and more damage and more damage. And every time that they crit, they reapply all of our splash damage radius bonuses. Then when the shot hits the wall, when it finally hits a wall and there's no more enemies, and it explodes with absurd radius and absurd damage, because as it traveled, it's built up so much damage. Same thing applies for like the Globetrotter. You shoot it at enemies, the projectiles keep bouncing, but instead of bouncing and fizzing out, they bounce and crit. And because they crit, they're going to keep bouncing and keep critting and keep stacking splash radius, weapon damage, and V1 and V2 until they are nuking entire rooms. And as long as there are enemies in the vicinity of these splash damage weapons to kill, they will keep stacking damage and just absolutely nuke things. That is why it's so easy to do ridiculous damages, because we're basically overlapping hitboxes or overlapping enemies and building damage with these splash damage radius weapons. Now, I do want to show you guys this Seer kill because it's a very, very cool kill with the Shocker. We're shooting down. The reason the Shocker is working here for this build is because its projectiles are hitting the top of Seer, traveling down to the bottom, hitting Seer again in the bottom, and then traveling upwards and exploding. No, it doesn't happen every time. I'm actually kind of hoping it fails here so I can show you guys what it looks like when it doesn't work, and then show you guys what it happens when it does work. But let's see if we can do this. So I'm going to shoot in front of Seer, because Seer usually walks like a few steps. So there was an enemy here, which usually there isn't an enemy. I wish there actually hadn't been one. But that enemy basically took the damage and then all those projectiles then went up and hit Seer, and they're just going to be doing ridiculous damage. That it wasn't even what I was looking for, but like if I shot down on this enemy with this weapon, if it didn't move, or if it hits the wall back there, see how those projectiles pass through and they keep passing through, and then they do this ridiculous explosion that killed this enemy here. It's because they're stacking this radius and this damage as they travel, and they will keep traveling as long as there's enemies to hit and keep exploding and stacking. That's gonna kill me because I'm not wearing a shock AoE shield, but you get the point. All right, let's talk about the rest of the gear, because hopefully this explanation makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, be sure to drop a comment and I can try to explain it to the best of my ability. So for the rest of the gear, the shield you're going to want to use is the Infernal Wish shield. Now, this is going to double the amount of projectiles that are fired, or if it's a multi-pellet thing, it'll just add an extra projectile. But the more projectiles, the more explosions, the more eraser procs, this shield works really, really well. However, if you want to use something that's like, for example, like a radiation shield or a shock or a shock immune shield or a radiation shield for radiation and shock weapons, like I'll put on the Transformer if I'm using the Shocker, and I'll use like the Infernal Wish if I'm using the Creamer, because the Creamer is a non-elemental weapon, so I'm already protected against that with Duct Tape Mod. But Infernal Wish, the grenade doesn't matter. We don't throw grenades. I'm using an on-grenade throw just because if, for example, I put an ASE Corrosive here, I do not have Corrosive immunity. Duct Tape Mod gives me immunity to splash damage, non-elemental damage, cryo damage. It does not give me immunity to corrosive dots, fire dots, shock dots. So if you are wearing another grenade that has an extra ASE, you will just kill yourself. Your artifact has to be a toboggan. It is just simply the best thing. All of our damage is building off of our initial shot, right? It is a cascade effect off of our initial shot. But if your initial shot doesn't do for any damage, if you're standing still, you're not aiming down sights, you're not imparting this initial projectile with any damage, you've got nothing to build off of. So you want to slide with the toboggan to give it that amp damage, and the number one role you want on your toboggan is area of effect damage. The reason splash damage, radius, and area of effect damage is so important is because in all those clips that I was showing you, you saw that there was a stray projectile or a stray eraser projectile that flies off to the side and explodes and does ridiculous damage to the target that you're shooting at. If you do not have the right amount of radius on, that projectile is going to do that eraser, but it's not going to have enough radius attached to it to actually hit the target again. So you need radius so that the projectiles that you're firing are hitting the same enemy more than once. That is super, super important. And then the Hustler, and then once again, if the gun has this like splash damage radius stated on it, this was plus 42 splash damage radius, it's probably going to work well for this build. Things that have splash damage radius and weapons that can come with splash damage anoints are going to be the best, because that splash damage anoint is going to be double dipped, meaning that every time the eraser projectile procs, it's going to reapply that additional 125 splash. Now, this anoint was nerfed. It used to be 200% splash. It's fine. Trust me, it still does ridiculous damage. All right, let's talk about the skill tree. So I was stressing about the skill tree for a while, and then I realized that like no matter what I spec'd, as long as I had 3 points into Eraser, the build nuked everything. So I went for some more survivability, just because, as I was saying earlier, if you go down on this build and you don't have a Seeing Dead, you literally just don't do any damage. So I went to go get all-rounder with charged relay, just so I could stay alive super easily. Running around with the barrier means that you're going to do crazy damage, and you also can't die, so it feels very, very good to be doing that. But if you wanted to put 5 out of 5 into Donnybrook for a little bit of extra gun damage and a little bit more points into Cold Bore, that's definitely a good decision. You'll do more damage, but more damage than infinite like damage cap is still infinite damage cap, and things are still going to get one shot. So it's not the biggest of deals, but yeah. So I went for some survivability with all-rounder. We're going Commitment, Headman's Hand. I went Deja Vu. Accuracy is not going to do anything for rocket launchers here. I went Domino Effect instead of Art of War because this gun damage isn't really needed. And the reload speed and fire rate, and we're obviously constantly going to be critting, is just always active because we're not putting that many points into Violent Violence. This kind of makes up for it, and we don't have Max Cool Hand. That kind of makes up for those lost points there. Shiver with a little bit more cooldown rate, Eraser, and our man Flint. didn't go drone delivery. We only need 1 point in salvation. We do not need points in violent violence. We'd like have like a few, but realistically, like, you're not spamming shots with this build. I did go good misfortune 3 out of 3. Is a change because I wanted my barrier to stay up as much as possible, because once again, it's not fun if you go into fight for your life. So the longer we can keep up barrier, the better. Deathfall is close. Good skills here. And then duct tape mod is what is giving us cryo immunity, so that when I shoot a cryo weapon, I put on the ASE incendiary to show you guys what would happen. So I'm probably gonna die here, but cryo immunity is very, very nice, and our own damage elemental immunity, because these shots are going to be going everywhere. You want to be immune to the damage, otherwise you're just going to be killing yourself over and over again. So make sure to only use cryo on this build as a bonus element, or if you're going to use something else, use radiation or a red suit or a transformer to protect yourself from that extra damage. And yeah, guys, that is it for the build. I hope y'all enjoyed. It is genuinely just so stupidly strong. And yeah, the save file is in the Discord. Also, we are less than 100 members away in the Discord from 69 420 members, which is pretty epic poggers. I'm sorry, I'll never say that again. So make sure to join the Discord for this save file and very active community. All right, guys, I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye.